everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited for today's video because we are doing a Q&A style video, which is really fun. So I've collated, I want to say like between 10 and 15 really good questions that you guys asked me on the little community tab. So thank you very much for posting your questions. We're going to be covering all things PhD application from the SOP to post-interview waiting stressiness. So we've got a lot of questions to get through. Let's get started. It's been a while since I've recorded a YouTube video here, so there have been some fun changes. Number one, we got new furniture, which is really fun, and it's like more cozy now. So we've got more furniture, and then the best thing that's ever happened in my entire life is we got a cat, and the cat is really cute, and the cat is currently sleeping. Everyone meet Dong Dong, cute little cat friend. But yeah, I just wanted to share that before we got started with this video. Okay, so number one, which is a really good question and one that is definitely relevant for not only PhD interviews, but interviews as a whole, is how do you respond to questions that you do not know the answer to? And this is such a good question because we've all been there in an interview where we're super nervous, we've done all the preparation we can, and then they ask you like a curveball question and you're sat there thinking like, I have no idea. And that is totally okay. Interviewers, number one, they do this on purpose. Like they ask you questions that they know that you're not going to know the answer to. I think it's more to see how you think and how you work through to solve these problems on questions that you don't know the answer to than to actually like test your knowledge. For example, I was doing a project on sea sponges, and in the interview, like they asked me about how the sea sponges were collected and how do you preserve a sea sponge in the post, and like that's not something that I knew the answer to. So brings me on to my second point on how to handle these questions is don't be afraid to speculate and take a best guess based on your personal experiences or research that you've done before or recent papers that you've read. Be like, well, I'm not actually sure how they do it in this case, but when I was reading XYZ, I noticed that they preserved it in whatever. That's tended to be how I answered these kind of questions. I genuinely just like had a go and tried to like explain my thought process to the interviewer. Because a lot of the time they don't care about the knowledge. I feel like maybe they do in some cases, but in most cases I feel like they won't care about the knowledge. It's probably more about like how you answer the question. And another one, this changed my life when I realized this one. It is okay to pause. You don't have to answer the question like right away. You can take a breath and collate your thoughts. And a lot of the time interviewers actually actively encourage this. So pause, draw on your own experiences, explain your thought processes to the person. So that is how I would tend to handle those kind of questions. The second question we are moving on to is more related to your statement of purpose or your personal statement. So this question says, should you start your personal statement with personal stories or just like dive straight in? Yeah, so this is definitely personal preference here, I would say, because at the end of the day, it's a personal statement. The rule that I tend to follow with these is only include a personal story if there's a point to it. Like if there's a thread or something that you're going to tie back into why you've applied to that particular school or that particular project. Like don't just tell a personal story for the sake of having a personal story. So I'd say if a personal story doesn't come sort of like naturally to you, I wouldn't force it. Like for me personally, again, very much my experience here, I have never started a personal statement with a personal story. I've always kind of jumped straight into the actual personal statement. I've drawn on personal experiences like sort of woven throughout my SOP, but I've never sort of started with like a set paragraph of. So again, I'd say it's very personal. Some schools do specify what they want from your personal statement, so definitely check your school's requirements and how long it needs to be. But yeah, I would say this is very much personal preference, and if you do include one, definitely weave it back, like have a common thread there. Don't just tell one and make it seem more disjointed than it needs to be. Question number 3, again, another one that relates to interview questions, which I think is actually a pretty good question. What are things that can get you rejected at the interview stage? Yes, no one wants to be in that position where you step in and you're like, I've just blown it. We all have bad interviews, but I wouldn't say that there's like a set criteria for things from when I've spoken to people that can get you rejected at the interview stage. I think the main one would be, in my experience, it's definitely not going to be a lack of knowledge. Like if you don't know the answer to a question, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to get you rejected. Equally, it's probably not going to be grades, a lack of research experience, because you'll have been filtered through already. If that was going to be a problem, you wouldn't have got to the interview stage. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. The key thing that could get you rejected at the interview stage could be your attitude. So your attitude towards the interviewers, always be polite, courteous, enthusiastic, passionate, smile, don't be afraid to smile, that kind of thing. If you come across like, okay, let's run through 2 different scenarios of people that are being interviewed. Let's go. Yeah, so my favorite food would probably be lasagna. I just really like the different flavors that you get in lasagna and the different textures that sort of come with it. And it always sort of reminds me of when my mom used to make lasagnas on like the weekend, and it just brings back lots of good family memories for me. So I think, yeah, I would definitely say lasagna is my favorite food. I don't know, like why would you ask that? I've no idea. I don't know. I don't really have one. Yeah, we can see how there's definitely two different ways of approaching interviews, and as long as you come across as enthusiastic, passionate, and like you're not really caring, I think if you're very dismissive of the interviewers, not really caring, not really putting much effort in, then that is something that definitely could get you rejected at the interview stage. So it's important to just sort of be yourself, be enthusiastic, and don't let the sort of nerves get to you so you sort of like clam up and end up being like the last person in the video over there. So that is how I think, that is the kind of things that I think might get you rejected at the interview stage. And this actually perfectly brings us on to question 4, which is what are interviewers actually looking for? Now, I was on the panel actually for like a preparing for your interview thing a couple of weeks ago. And this was a question that definitely came up from prospective students a lot. And the one common thread from when I've spoken to people has been enthusiasm and passion. Technical skills and scientific abilities are definitely valued, don't get me wrong, but they can be taught. And the PhD is ultimately designed to be a PhD program. Again, very much depends on which program you're applying to. So definitely like do your research there and figure out what they're looking for in that sense. But the common thread that I've noticed is passion, enthusiasm, and a dedication to sort of like learning and willing to collaborate and do research that's not necessarily on like your field of it. Like being willing to branch out and learn new things, I think is definitely a key one. Another helpful way to navigate this program dependent thing is to talk to people who've had interviews at the program that you've got an interview for, so you can sort of ask them what the interview process was like and what questions you could expect, that kind of thing. So that's definitely a good place to start with this one. Question number 5, what if it didn't go well? Yes, we have all been there where we've had an interview that we thought was really good and then we came out of it and it went terribly, even though we were really excited to do it and we did all the preparation, we did everything right. So what to do if it doesn't go well or you feel that it hasn't gone well? I think what I tended to do with these interviews is remember that a lot of the time you think it's gone worse than it is. And I know that's like cliche, and I'm sorry to everyone who thinks that's cliche, but I just think it's so true. Like you think that you've done worse than you actually have. For example, when I was interviewing for the clinical primer scheme, honestly, it was the hardest interview I've ever done. I thought it went absolutely terribly, like so bad. I came out and I was like, oh my goodness, there is no way that's that. It went so badly. There were so many difficult questions and I was fumbling and every single question was one I didn't know the answer to and I was like, oh. But actually they seemed to think it went really well and I ended up getting an offer. So try to think of all the positives instead of focusing on the negatives. Like, you know, when you come out of an exam and you're constantly thinking of all the questions you got wrong, don't do that. Think about the things that you got right and be like, okay, well, I tried my best, like with the knowledge I had, I tried and I handled it the best I could in that situation, which is true. Like you're never going to go into an interview and not try. So definitely like remembering that. I wouldn't dwell on it. Like honestly, like you do in exams, and I've adopted this philosophy and I stand by it. I know that everyone is different and I don't want to like tell you that you're wrong if you do this, but after an exam, I don't look at it. I don't go away and look at the answers. I just like leave it to however I did in that moment, and it really helped me. I do not compare. I don't chat to other people about it. It's very much gone in the past. And if you feel that your interview went badly, I would do exactly that. I would not ask everyone how else theirs went, because they're just gonna go, oh, it went really well, yeah, it was great, we chatted about this. That just makes you feel terrible. It serves no purpose other than to make you feel terrible. So forget about it, put it in the past, focus on the positives, and literally fingers crossed. So this question goes back to like the application process. Before we're starting to like think about writing our SOP and applying. And this question is there a right amount of research experience before you can consider applying to PhDs? This is a question I'm really passionate about, and I would say that in my opinion and my experience, the answer is no. There is no right way. Obviously it differs by program. So I remember, for example, when I was applying to veterinary school, some schools would ask for 10 weeks work experience, some wouldn't even specify. So if your program obviously asks for like X number of weeks working in a lab environment or something, then abide by that. Like, don't listen to me, listen to what they say. But in general, if it's not specified, sorry. In general, if it's not specified, I would say that no, there is no limit. The key thing here, and I vaguely mentioned this in one of my other videos where I went through interview questions, and I will link that video up here because I think that's a really helpful video. Like, thing that I mentioned is nobody cares what you've done. They don't care. They care what you got out of it and what you learned from it. So even if you have one research experience, but you learned so much and you're dedicated to sort of learning, you applied it to lots of different situations, you're much more likely to be accepted than someone who has had 12 weeks worth of working in a lab or spent 8 years as a technician who has learned absolutely nothing from their role and has no desire to keep learning or apply it in any way, shape or form. So when you're talking about your research experiences, whether they're many or few, focus focus on what you learned from it, what you got out of it, not necessarily what you did. So that would be something that is key to sort of navigating this if you feel that you haven't got the right amount of research experience. More research experience is great. Like, always looking for more research experience or more ways to learn is a really good thing to have. I also covered in another video, which I'll link up here, about different ways of getting research experience. So that's always something that's good. But yeah, I wouldn't don't self-reject because you think that you haven't got enough research experience. Like, leave that up to the admissions team. This brings me on to another really good question, actually, and that is, should you wait for the whole decision period to be over before you start thinking about other programs to apply for, other research experience to get, or should you start doing that sooner? The way that I handled this when I was going through my PhD applications for the second time round, I did not wait until the application process was over. I was always on the lookout for ways to get more research experience, and I was actively applying to more PhD programs that I thought I was interested in, regardless of who else I was on the wait list for or waiting to hear back from or whatever. I was constantly like looking for other programs and looking for other ways to get into that research environment. That's just what I did. I know that some other people didn't, and they prefer to like hear back from one before they start like going for another. I'm of the belief that don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you know you want to do a PhD and there's 10 programs out there with different deadlines and different requirements, prep yourself for all 10 and start early. Just because you've had an interview at one does not mean that you're guaranteed a spot, is another good one. Like, don't assume anything. Obviously, we hope that you will get a spot and it'll all be good, but I would definitely say like keep your options open until, and also then it gives you more options. You might get offers from like 6 other places and then be able to like decide, and that's great, a great position to be in. So I definitely say, like, for me, I did not wait. No, I was doing it as I went along. So our next question is, how do you handle the waiting period? And I think this is an excellent question because the waiting period is often the most stressful time. You've done everything you possibly can to impress these people, and you've worked so hard for so long, and now it's just all in their hands and you kind of just have to wait for them to make a decision, and that is terrifying. So how did I handle the waiting period? In my opinion, I really just tried to forget about it. I kind of touched on that earlier, but it is a lot easier said than done to forget about it. So I just like immersed myself in what I was currently doing at the moment. I also, I vaguely touched on this earlier, as I was constantly looking for other ways of getting more research experience. So I was like joining labs, emailing professors, and really like immersing myself in that and looking for other programs as we went along, just so that it didn't feel like I was sat waiting to hear back from something. Just don't constantly refresh your emails. Like, maybe set yourself limits is something I did. I was like, I will only check my emails twice a day to see if I've heard back. And also being clear on what their timeline is can help the whole process being a little bit less stressful. Which brings me on to our next point. Should you ask about the decision timeline if it's not like necessarily on their website, or it's not like really obvious and you don't know it? I did, yes, 100%. Like, some programs don't tell you if you haven't got in, and there is nothing more frustrating because you're just waiting forever, and it's not fair. It's not fair on you. I really don't think programs should do this. I think it's a load of rubbish and they really shouldn't. So if anyone out there's listening, like, please tell your applicants if they haven't been successful. Really mean. So I did email people. Yeah, I left it like a few weeks, and if I hadn't heard anything, I sort of like sent a little email asking like, oh, I just wondering about that timeline, just to see what they said, because it just made it so much easier than I had in my mind, like, oh, I'll hear back on this date, oh, I'll hear back from this date. It happened to me. Like, I didn't get into a place because I hadn't heard back from them, and then I emailed them and they were like, oh, sorry, you've been rejected. I was like, cool, thanks for letting me know. But it's always better to know. So yes, I did. We're moving back to interview questions for this next question, and that is, what are some good answers for why you want to do a PhD? Yeah, this is like a difficult one to answer, I think, because it's very personal. Like, ultimately it's like why you want to do a PhD, and I would say that's my number one thing, is to keep it personal and always draw back to your own experiences and your own research experience, your own interest, that kind of thing. So I can't sit here and be like, this is exactly why you want to do a PhD, because I'm not you. So yeah, I would really dig deep to try and figure out your why. I know that I vaguely covered that in last week's video, 2 weeks ago video. Now I'll link that in the description below, and I also think I vaguely touched on some good answers for this in my interview question video, which I will also link below, because those are good points to like figuring out your why and going through that question in a little bit more detail. But I would say, for figuring out why you want to do a PhD, like, make sure it's personal to you and it's true. Like, try not to be anyone else other than your authentic self when answering this question. And that brings me on to the second part of this question, which is how you convey passion for wanting to do a PhD, and how can you convince them that like you're the right person for this. And the things I did for this was showcasing like what my experiences were and what I'd learned from them, definitely, because I always think, again, this is what I think that like showing a time commitment to learning a skill or having some experience or whatever is a great way of showing passion. Like, time is so important to people, and And if you spent it going out there, emailing professors, getting all that goody experience in, then that is like a really good way of showing you're passionate and you genuinely want to be there and you genuinely want to learn. So if there's anything like online courses, research experiences that you've done yourself, listing these and not just listing, demonstrating what you learned from them and showing your enthusiasm is a good way of conveying your passion. For me personally, I don't know if you can tell, but I use my hands a lot and I smile a lot when I talk. So like, I guess body language, like actively engaging with the interviewers, looking at them, and they want to see you come alive with something, because that really showcases your passion. Like, they want to see what that topic is. Everyone's got one, that one topic that you can talk about for ages and get really excited about. So they're basically trying to dig and find that. First, those other videos if you want a bit more detail for this, but that has tended to be how I followed that question. Then we have our last question, which is, should you send thank you emails? Should you send thank you emails after the interview? Oh, I have heard so many mixed opinions on this one, so it's definitely a good question to ask. Personally, I didn't send thank you emails to everybody routinely. I did send thank you emails to a couple of faculty that I interviewed with at various points if I felt like it was a particularly good discussion. You know, when you've come out of a discussion or an interview and you like really clicked with that person and it went really, really well, that is when I tended to send a follow-up email and just say like, hi, thanks so much for your time chatting with me today. It was great to meet you. And yeah. Don't be assumptive again with saying like, I'm really looking forward to starting work in your lab. We don't do that. We do not assume. These people are very busy and they probably won't reply to your email, but they might see your name and they might remember your name. And I think that that's always like a good thing. It also shows like gratitude. You're grateful, you're aware that they took the time to interview you, but you're not being like over assumptive about the fact that you've got in or are going to be working with them. So I only sent them out to people who I felt like I had a really good discussion with. I didn't send it out if it was just like an average interview or like one of those big long panel interviews. No, I didn't bother. It was only if I had a one-on-one discussion with someone that I thought it was like really engaging or whatever. But that is personal preference. I know that some people who I've spoken to did routinely send thank you emails to people. So it's ultimately what you feel comfortable doing. Not sending a thank you email, I don't think will hinder you. So if you don't send one, I don't think it's going to negatively impact your application. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I think. But if you do send one and you send it wrong or it comes across in the wrong way, then it could hinder your application. Yeah, I'd very carefully select how and why I sent thank you emails. But yeah, that is my kind of framework for that. So there we have it. We have come to the end of another YouTube video answering your questions about the application process from SOP to post interview. I hope that this video has been helpful. If it has been helpful, then please give it a like, drop a comment below if you have any differing opinions or anything else you want to add. Also drop a comment below if you have any other questions that you want me to answer, because I'll probably do a couple more of these videos in the next few coming months. So drop questions below if you have any. If you like this video and want to see more PhD related content, then please do click subscribe. Thank you so much to everybody who has subscribed. It is so much fun coming together every Wednesday to talk about things that we're passionate about with PhDs. So I love it, and let's continue to grow. Thanks so much again for watching this video, and I will see you guys next week for another one.